Hey everybody, Corey here, coming at you with another knife review. This time it is of the Civivi knives Baby Banter. Yes, the Civivi knives, not the Wii knives, because this smaller version of the Banter is being produced by Civivi. It's made of slightly more budget materials. Well, not slightly, more budget materials. Although there's really no problem with that based on what I see. As always, I'm going to kind of give this new intro for those of you who don't watch the entire video. Ya damn bastards. And that's okay. But this is a Civivi that feels like a Wii. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Wii Knives is the parent company. It is it's the not budget. It's the luxury company. They make more of the titanium and the premium blade steel models, whereas Civivi is the budget brand of Wii knives. And you can generally see a little bit of a difference when it comes to quality and attention to detail when you're looking at a Civivi versus when you're looking at a Wii. That being said, the Baby Banter is a small version of the Banter, the Wii knives Banter, not the Civivi knives Banter. And it really feels like they took the thought and the quality control of Wii and just kind of branded it as Civivi to make it more appealing, I don't know, to the budget crowd or to who this might be targeted at, and we'll talk about that, later in the video. But the quality and the thought are really there. It really does feel like a Wii knife that's just been branded as Civivi. So for some of the things that I want to talk about, the thumb studs, lovely anodization. You get a better view of them in the B-roll footage, but they are anodized because they are titanium. That's kind of cool. It's something I don't think most people really care about, but the thumb studs are titanium. They are anodized, depending on what model you get. The other things that I noticed right out of the box, the centering is perfect. You'll see a close-up of that in the B-roll footage as well. The action is really good. It's not too hard to disengage the lock. I really like that. I've had that issue with some of my Civivis, is they have a very aggressive lock bar, and sometimes there's a decent amount of lock bar tension. That's not the case here. The ergonomics are surprisingly good for such a small knife. I mean, you can see here, when I use the finger choil, I absolutely consume this knife. Which I think is fine. It's made to be a small knife. It makes sense. But pay attention to how small this knife actually is before you buy it. I think a lot of people are going to be under the impression that it's like a Rat 2. It is not like a Rat 2. It is like 75% of a Rat 2, maybe a little bit less. So, if you think the Rat 2 is small, this is definitely an accessory knife. That being said, jimping is nice. The ergos are nice, for what it is. I love that on a budget knife. See if you can kind of see that there. Should be good enough. It's a deep carry pocket clip, and they used recessed screws. Oh, and by the way, the deep carry, it goes above the scales just a little bit. It's good. They did a good job. They got the deep carry right. They got the quality control right. It can't cut me through the back. The action is good. The centering is good. There's no blade play. The ergos are good. It's a functional blade shape. Overall, this is shaping up to be really quite impressive. And oh, by the way, there's a lanyard hole there, so you don't have to worry about, if you're someone who likes lanyards. It's an adequate size, and it's a tiny enough knife to where I really do think you could hang this from your neck if you were that kind of person, or, just do whatever you wanted from a lanyard perspective. So, pretty cool little knife. Let's get into the specifics. All right, so let's talk about some of the specifications of the Baby Banter. The overall length is 5.46 inches and the blade length is 2.34 inches. Those are the only ones that, well, no, I'll give you one more. The blade thickness is 0.09 inches, so it's going to be a good cutter. Reminds me very much of my Rat 2 in terms of its cutting capabilities. By the way, here's the Rat 2. Here it is next to the Rat 2. Here it is next to the Off-Grid Knife Scorpion. The Off-Grid Knife Scorpion is my conventionally large knife. The Rat 2 is my conventionally small knife. If we put these butt to butt, line them up with this right here, you can see the difference is much more pronounced here. It is significantly smaller than the Rat 2, and it is almost half the size of the Off-Grid Knives Scorpion. Size is definitely something you're going to want to think about when you consider purchasing this knife. That being said, I'm actually really impressed with this knife so far. From a specifications perspective, you can get a lot done, especially because of this finger choil. We'll talk about that more in the ergonomics section, but the specs are a little deceiving because you really can get a better grip on this knife than you might think. That being said, being such a tiny knife, it really does lend itself well to being carried. So I'm going to put the specifications on the screen as compared to the Scorpion and the Rat 2, and we're going to move on. So let's talk about the ergonomics on the Civivi Baby Banter. This is, again, like I was saying, surprisingly good, primarily because of the finger choil. For me, as a guy with I would say average size hands, I don't like that I can't get my pinky on there at all unless I'm using the finger choil. And even if I am using the finger choil, it's a little cramped. I actually still prefer to keep my pinky off of it when I use the finger choil and just, kind of choke up like this. That being said, finger choils are nice. I don't usually use finger choils. In this case, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's really nice. They did also put jimping on the inside where you would not normally see it because they are pretty much expecting you to use that finger choil to get a full grip on the knife. The jimping itself, pretty aggressive. I would say it's actually borderline uncomfortable, but for the most part, it's primarily just functional. I would take over-aggressive jimping over under-aggressive jimping any day of the week. So jimping is good. Finger choil is good. The neutral grip is really, it's nice. I find myself enjoying neutral grip knives more as I continue to handle more of them. And then finally, the pocket clip. I was actually trying to find hot spots on this knife. I really can't find any, especially when you choke up on the finger choil. I don't know. It's not a hot spot. It doesn't dig into my hand. And maybe that's because you just can't really squeeze this knife that hard. You can't get an amazing grip on it. I mean, again, it's not meant to be a worker, but yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. And oh, by the way, if you consider a pocket clip to be part of the ergonomics, it is a deep carry pocket clip with recessed screws, and it does adequately come over the top of the knife, so it is a true deep carry when it is in your pocket. The lock bar is easy to disengage, and the action is very, very smooth. I did find that it got better after I lubed it out of the box. Now it's extremely smooth. I mean, really, 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 this is right up there with all of their other best knives. Very impressive. Also, thumb studs, in my opinion, easy to deploy, aside from the fact that it's a relatively small knife and you're probably not used to maybe flipping a knife that is this small. But the jimping on the thumb studs is also aggressive enough for you to get a grip on it and deploy it successfully every single time. So overall, we're looking at some pretty good ergonomics on this knife. All right, so let's talk about what this knife does well and what it could improve. I really don't want to sell out here. It does everything well. It does a really good job. If I had to pick one thing, it does a really good job of being a small knife that isn't useless or doesn't feel useless. It is tiny. but you can just tell that it's made to cut things. I mean, it fits so well in your hand, and it's so well designed, and the blade shape is so functional. I don't really look at this knife and think like, it's technically a knife, but I wouldn't carry it, you know, if you were going to really need to cut stuff. No, on the contrary, actually, I think this is actually a really nice, small knife that behaves like a knife should. It behaves like a full-size knife should. So in that sense, I think what they've done the best here is they've created a small knife that feels like a real knife and not, you know, a backup knife or a last resort knife. That's what I like about this. In terms of what they could do better, I honestly, I've tried, I've thought about it. I can't find a single thing on this knife that I like actively dislike. It can't cut me through the back. The action is good. The action is snappy. It's very smooth. It's easy to close. It's easy to open. The QC is there. The centering is good. There's no blade play. The pocket clip is done very well. You know, even down to the spring tension. Spring tension is good. Everything is just good. The only thing I could think of, maybe, if I want to nitpick, give me a filler tab right here. Since this is an ambidextrous knife, they give you this cutout so that you can switch the pocket clip. Maybe just put a filler here. And the only other thing... No, I was going to say maybe make the pivot flush, but it really doesn't... It's not a big deal. It doesn't bother me. It's a typical Civivi pivot. The coating is good. Everything's good. There's really not a lot they can do to this knife. I think this is one of those knives that I handle it and it brings me back. And it makes me say, did I really need a Sebenza or did I just want a Sebenza? Because this is one of those knives where they do everything very well and it makes you go, wow. You know, you don't have to pay a ton of money to get a really good knife. So that's what I have to say about those. All right, QC. I have no issues. You're going to see a recurring pattern in this video. The body screws are flush. The pocket clip has been done well. It's deep carry and the screws are recessed. The anodization, all the finishes are nice. There's nothing strange about the G10. The anodization on the thumb studs is good. The jimping is all good. The bevel on the knife is pretty much perfect from heel to tip. Did I say the jimping was good? The jimping is good. The ergos are good. The blade finish, there's nothing going on there that looks strange. I will say, at first you see it and you think it's like just a DLC, and then you realize that it looks like there's a bit of stone washing to it. I don't have any problem with that. If anything, it makes it look a little bit more rugged, gives it a little bit more character. I actually like it. But again, QC, nothing's loose. The centering is good. The lockup is good. There's no blade play. The action is good. It's good. That's it. I'll stop. I'm being redundant now. I have no issues from a QC perspective. So let's talk about value. Gosh, I mean, what are we looking at here? We've got titanium thumb studs. We've got a G10 handle, and we've got Nitro V blade steel. For those of you who don't know, Nitro V is kind of a newer blade steel on the scene. It's looking really good. It does have stainlessness to it. It is actually quite hard. You can look up the specs online, but long story short, Nitro V might be my favorite budget blade steel at this point. I went through this phase where I had a kind of love-hate relationship with D2. I used to say D2 was my favorite budget blade steel, and then I realized how really, really prone to corrosion it actually was. And that's when I kind of started to fall out of love with it. But Nitro V, it seems to address all the problems. It's got the hardness, it's got the toughness, it's got enough stainlessness to where you don't need to worry nearly about it as much as you would about, you know, say as D2, for example. So that being said, this runs about $50. You can get it most places for about $50. I really have no problem with that. I think if you're not a knife person and you're not familiar with Civivi quality or Nitro V blade steel or G10, you might just look at this and be like, it's a plastic knife. I don't understand how you could pay $50 for that. But honestly, all the materials included, and don't forget the thumb studs are titanium. That's another little thing. From a value perspective, I'd say this is actually really good. If you're looking for an excuse to buy a knife, this is probably going to be the smallest knife in your collection, maybe outside of Swiss Army knives. And I would say, hey, if you're looking for a really good, really small knife, I have no issue paying $50 for this. I think this is definitely the small knife that could last you a lifetime. I don't have any issues with it. And if this is the size that you were looking for, you're going to be completely satisfied, in my opinion. All right, so last up, my personal opinions on this knife. You can generally tell how I feel about a knife, throughout the review. And this one, again, it's going to be really straightforward. It's just good. It's really good. Honestly, I might say that it's great. For a knife this small, I don't know. I mean, I've held other small knives, and they didn't make me feel the way that this knife makes me feel. This is a really good small knife. This would be really great for taking to the gym, or Ben Peterson was interviewed himself, and he actually said they designed these with women in mind. Okay, don't get carried away. This isn't a girl's knife, whatever. But that being said, I did actually buy this. This isn't my knife. This was a gift for my girlfriend. This is her first knife. She knows I'm into knives, and this one is going to be hers. And I saw it and I thought, wow, that's like literally the perfect knife for her. That being said, almost a little sad to let it go, because like I said, this is really nice. I would love to take this to the gym. I would love to think of this as a bug out alternative, although it's a little bit shorter than a bug out. I would think of using this in the same practical applications as the bug out. When I want a really light, really thin knife that I can just kind of take with me anywhere. If I know I'm going to be running around, maybe like the hardware store, again, or the gym, something where there might be a lot of activity, you're really not going to pay too much attention to this when you're not using it. Overall, again, it's a Civivi, but it feels like it has fit and finish quality. All the design elements are really well thought out. Ben Peterson did a really good job with this. Kind of makes me want to handle a Banter. But yeah, I mean, for a small knife, this is kind of the way to go right now. I wouldn't even, with how good this is, I'm actually not really interested in handling any other knives that are about this small. I might mess around with something really crazy like a titanium S35VN tiny knife like this just to see what it's all about. But as long as this is on the market, this makes it a really hard sell for me to, even be interested in anything else. Really reminds me of the Rat 2. Not in ergonomics or style or anything like that, but in how I feel about the knife. Because the Rat 2 is a relatively small knife, and I always say, for other knives that are in this price range and have similar quality, it's hard to recommend anything but the Rat 2, because the Rat 2 does such a good job. Similarly, the Civivi Baby Banter is so well made, and it seems so well suited for the task that it was made for and the EDC purpose that it was made for. I don't have a lot of experience in the small knife realm, but I would say it'd be a pretty hard sell to get me to convince you to try to buy any other knife over this one. I think the Baby Banter is going to dominate the small knife market for a very long time. And I'm actually excited to see if they do come out with, a titanium S35VN version of this or something along those lines. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you found it useful, and I will see you guys next time.